We are joined by Jonathan Gray. I wonder, Tex, are you still there?
I'm here, Bill.
Okay, we had Tex Meyer in the last hour. Jonathan, when we talked last time, you had some evidence that both Donald and Hillary are under the influence of Jesuits. I know they went to the Alfred Murrah dinner, but I've got to make a couple of statements here, and I like controversy because it brings out the facts. 2 months before I became a medical student in 1973, I joined Phi Rho Sigma on recommendations that I would be joining a medical fraternity to help further my career. I was tapped up by the Dean of Medicine, and I was given all kinds of information that most doctors never learn. But I never saw any evidence that the medical profession was doing anything satanic or evil, either in Phi Chi or Phi Rho Sigma, both of our medical fraternities, because we are a sister college of Harvard University in Boston, Massachusetts. I know that both Trump's father, and it's evidence that not only Trump but his daughter also belonged to some kind of secret order, probably the Royal Archmasons, but it turns out that all of the founding fathers, pretty well with very few exceptions, were members not only of a secret order but also were Christians. And in fact, the principles we revere in the U.S. Constitution are principles that were co-shared by not only what we call the good secret orders and the Christians at the time. So I think that painting all we call, if you want to call it like in the ancient times, secret orders, which are like the universities, as all universally evil is incorrect. So I don't think that in my research, I found any evidence that Trump is involved with any satanic ceremonies or anything evil. I do think that he has a narcissistic personality disorder, and he has all around his apartments things about Apollo, and I do believe that there are things about him that give me pause, like his potty tongue, which I think he has a touch of Asperger's syndrome, which is why he's probably verbally his own best enemy, which is why he stumbled a number of times through the debates, and in between by, counterpunching people like this very corrupt Machado, who was brought forward by the Democrats to attack him on his potty mouth and his kind of statements that were on hot mic and vile with Benny Bush. But I don't think there's any evidence that the man is innately evil. I think that he's basically a baby Christian who's gone through the transformation of listening to fellow Americans about the destruction of the American culture and society. And I'm very concerned that if Trump doesn't get in, the movement's going to continue. But we are Christians, we are patriots, and we have all kinds of information that tells us if Hillary gets in, we're going down the pathway of literally the whore of Babylon, introducing us to the demonic Satanism that'll destroy not only America but bring the world to a crisis called the mark of the beast and the tribulation. And I really think that there's no indication that I can see that Donald Trump, in any way, shape, or form, other than his loose tongue, is any way a misogynist, a hater, or if you want to call a serial rapist like Bill Clinton. So, one of the things that's happened is it's rubbed off, and when I confront young people especially, they make the most ridiculous statements that Donald Trump is a misogynist, a rapist, although he hires Hispanics like crazy at all his golf courses and his building projects. He has more women in his middle management than any other corporation probably in America, and I see no evidence whatsoever that he's not a Christian. None. So what do you think?
Well, Bill, this is a very, as you say, a very controversial subject. And let me introduce...
Yeah, and I want to hear the evidence, because there's no one who's perfect. But by the way, Donald Trump has got a long way to go to become what we call a strong, biblically based, end-time Christian. But I don't believe the man, other than having his heart to try to rebuild America. And by the way, most of the issues he won't face. He won't face the fact that Mr. Obama, for example, is a foreigner posing as an American. He won't face the fact that 9/11 was an inside job done by America to itself. He won't face the fact that, the full force of the evil of Hillary Clinton. He'll make criticisms, but he won't call her a witch that actually is involved with satanic ceremonies and pedophilia and snuff films. He won't confront the fact that we're led by people like Podesta, who goes to this spirit-burning ceremony, which recently came out in WikiLeaks. He doesn't want to go there because people find it so fantastic. They think that you've got to be a nut to even bring up these issues, when the fact is we're dealing with a level of evil that pales with the average mortal mind of the average, what we call knucklehead American, so-called pseudo-Christian Laodicean, who doesn't want to face the music that we're dealing with an evil that if she gets into power, even if she's just the president and there's no Senate or Congress, we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, Bill, when you want my comment, I'm prepared to give it.
Yeah, I want to hear it. Yeah, I want to hear your comment because I want a dialogue that explains why you think, because you mentioned this last time, that Trump and Hillary are both under Jesuit control. Now, I know the power structure from the Pindar through the Council of the 12, and I know that there's oppositional forces going on here, but I see, in all my research, I found absolutely no evidence that the power structures are controlling. Now, I do know there's people around him that I'm concerned about. For example, Rudy Giuliani must have been part of the cover-up of 9/11. He was there. I know that there's people like Chris Christie, who's a globalist. I know there's other people he selected to be around him, to me, that I'm concerned about. And I think that there's a great deal of naivety in the man, because if you massage his ego, you can get away with almost anything with Donald Trump. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, Bill, what I'd like to say is that I have nothing personally against any of these people. The people themselves, their character, their sincerity in what they believe, I have no question about that. They can be sincerely wrong and yet dreadfully wrong, or they can be sincerely right and very right. The sincerity and the character is not under question. I'm not going to attack anybody on that basis.
Right, you want to attack with facts, which is good. In other words, this is like a spiritual court of law is what you're doing.
That is right, yes. Right. Now, I'm also going to attack it from a biblically prophetic viewpoint also, because we know what's going to happen to America and the world, and this is not going to depend upon who gets into the White House on this election.
Well, that's a very important statement, because it really is irrelevant. In other words, you can come up with all kinds of good intentions, like it says the pathway to destruction is led by good intentions. So Trump can come in with all these plans, but if he's a baby Christian and doesn't see the problems and problem identification, you're absolutely correct with the people surrounding him. We can still be on the pathway toward the mark of the beast, which will come from America eventually.
That is true. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to make a very brief statement, then I'm going to elaborate on it.
Right.
There is total papal control of the 2016 American election. Total Vatican control.
Okay, explain that, because I believe the Vatican has a lot more control than you think. Just like in 1293, when the then Pope kicked the crown off the King of England after he coronated him, stated he owned everything, the lands and the people and everything in England, and made it very plain to him, the king at the time of England, which, by the way, later came up when King Henry VIII decided to kick the Vatican out with his own private army. People need to understand the power of the Vatican over the world financial system and the geopolitical system and the World Council of Churches. It's vast, isn't it?
Oh, it's enormous. In fact, there's a statement in Revelation that says, in the Vatican, and I'm paraphrasing her for Vatican, in the Vatican is found the blood of all who are slain upon the earth.
Right.
That's a big statement.
It is. In fact, if you go back to the revolution in China and the revolution in Russia, the Vatican, the Jesuits were intimately in control of setting up both of those communist revolutions, weren't they?
Oh, yes. And the Vatican loves to play at one. She sets up one, then she'll set up a counter, and she loves to play one against another so that the situation arises where she comes in with a peaceful solution and she comes out as victor.
Oh, okay. So in other words, they create a dialectic and then they have a solution for the dialectic that maintains their control.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, let me go back to that Catholic Charities fundraiser. It's not a charities fundraiser so much as a political manipulator.
Right.
Trump and Hillary were both at the annual Catholic Charities fundraiser, $3,000 a plate. It's not known as the Al Smith dinner, and it's also been seen on Fox News over there in your country.
Right.
Trump and Hillary were shown with Cardinal Timothy Dolan in the middle between the two of them, and the U.S. flag on one side and the Vatican flag on the other side.
Right.
And in Trump's address that day to these people, he said, "We can also agree on the need to stand up against anti-Catholic bias." Now, that's a very interesting point. So anyone who speaks against the Vatican is going to be stand up against under Trump's regime. That's what he's promised Rome.
Right. Even if Rome's policy violates canon law and previous edicts by American cardinals, he's basically made a statement that he's going to support the Roman version of whatever further dogma or policies are. is what you're saying.
That's true, yes. Now, he also says we'll defend religious liberty, which is exactly what the cardinals of America are saying. As long as we're in the minority, we'll defend religious liberty. So he is reciting what they're telling him to say, and he's saying the same thing.
Right.
Now, and to defend a culture that celebrates life. That's Family Day. Now, Family Day is being used by Pope Francis as a force to bring in other laws in small writing under the guise of protecting the family. And these laws are religious laws that have to do with Vatican ultimate control.
So in other words, under the guise of pro-life, because I've done pro-life talks, and 75% of the time the priest would allow me to come to their church and set up the donuts and the coffee and the other things. But about 5% of the time would the evangelicals allow me. They'd slam the phone down so often, I was losing hearing. So the Vatican Church is very manipulative. They basically will say they're pro-life, but when you actually get deeper into the dogma, they tie it to other things, is what you're saying.
That is right, yes. And Trump actually regurgitated all the things the cardinals are saying in this meeting.
Right, because they want to become the head of this World Council of Churches, which will be this new amalgam super church that's sanctioned by the United Nations.
That is right. And then Trump continued. He said, there are religious leaders here today, this is in the Catholic meeting that he was addressing, whom we can look up to and follow. And then he put up his right hand and gave the 666 signal. The circle of 2 fingers followed by the tops of the 6 on the other 3 fingers. The 666 signal was not just suddenly rehearsed for the occasion.
I've seen that many times.
It came so naturally as though it was second nature.
Yeah, I've seen that many times. In fact, if you see pictures of his apartment, he's got Apollo everywhere. So I think he's got an Apollo complex, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, there's the 666 signal, which, of course,
right,
the Bible links to the Vatican.
Right, now, of course, 666, tell us what the Hebrew letters for that are. Vav, 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 which is 666.
Yes.
It ties back to gematria and the use of the numerical astrological signs using the 6 as the mathematical, if you want to call it, scale of knowing the occultation of planets. Which,
yes.
Yeah, so why do you think he's using 666? Is he saying this is the time for this to happen? It's under the 66 or the astrological signs? Is that what he's referring to?
Well, the 666 signal, the Bible says it's the number of the beast's name.
Right, so in other words, it has to be occurring in a specific astrological sign that you'll see that will indicate that 666 is happening.
Yes, and let me explain exactly how every pope, when he is ordained, including Pope Francis, it happens to every single pope, he takes the 666 name, which is Vicarius Filii Dei. That is, the vicar of the Son of God. In other words, in place of. The word anti means in place of.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, basically
he
that
stands
title
in the place of God on earth. He is God on earth. And he takes that name, Vicarius Filii Dei, as his title when he is crowned Pope.
Yeah, in other words, he's the A-N-T-E, not anti, A-N-T-I. He's the Antichrist.
That is right.
Yeah.
And now, when he takes that signal, you add up the Latin, because it's in Latin, it's a Latin word, Latin title, Vicarius Filii Dei. You take every one of the Latin letters, they add up to precisely 666. That is the number of his name, referred to in the book of Revelation.
Now, which star sign or occultation of star signs does that 666 stand for? Because I'm familiar with some of the astrological and gematria signs. My guess is specific star signs indicate that this time period is coming, because what I've been told from my other sources excuse me, is that the globalists want to have the completion of the New World Order by 2020, 4 years from now.
Well, the 666 signal was given by our friend Donald Trump. In other words, I'm in line with what Pope Francis wants to do. Right,
so I know he's a high-level Mason. There's no doubt about that. And I know he has good intentions, at least on the superficial level. But remember, like that there's always higher-level Masons that are literally giving him orders and controlling him. Many of the people around him, for example, we know are not clean. For example, Rudy Giuliani is very familiar with the Port Authority in New York. I had from my source in Finland that he was contracted by the Port Authority in New York in 1998, 3 years before 9/11, to demolish the World Trade Center towers with micronukes and RDX. I posted the documents that I received from this Finnish munitions expert that gave them to me. They're over on my website, Clay and Iron. So the fact is, although Trump comes in, remember now, he comes from the most powerful city on earth. We call it Jew York City because of the Khazarian Jews that are there. They literally run the world economy with the sub-state of the city of London, England. And those two cities, the city of London, the city square, and Manhattan, lower Manhattan, they run the world. And people don't understand.
Actually, there's three cities, and the Bible talks about these three falling apart in the end time. There's New York, there's London, and there's the Vatican. All of them cities.
Oh yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah,
of their own within the bigger cities.
Well, remember the Blackfriars Bridge and the Banco Ambrosio and so on. People don't understand that the world financial system, even the European Union, is made by the Rothschild money. But the controllers of the controllers, like I've said before, it's one thing to own all of the money in the world. It's another thing to own the bank that prints the money, and it's another thing to own the banker. The banker is owned literally by the Vatican. All the financial systems on earth literally go back to the Jesuits and go back to the bankers that are owned by the Vatican. People say, no, that can't be. I said, yes, all the Western money in the world. And that's why we have the BRICS nations, Russia and China, trying to break away and trying to battle. They don't have much of a chance. They're only 10% of the world finances is actually in non-Vatican control, only 10%. So the fact is, once they defeat Russia and China and these other countries economically, they will have the mark of the beast, which will be electronic currency, and it will be based in America because the cybernetic control of the world, which is Facebook, Twitter, all these other versions of the NSA, no such agency, are totally under control of the British, under the control of the Vatican, under control of the world bankers, and ultimately the Jesuits. Right?
Everything you have said about the Jesuits there is absolutely correct.
Right. So in other words, I don't dispute the fact that he's a high-level Mason, but from what we see in his policies, we see Donald Trump at least coming in and saying he's going to do all these good things for America based on Christian principles. So
and this is exactly reflecting what Pope Francis is saying he's going to do.
So what you're saying is that Donald Trump is just a different version of deception. In other words, we have someone who's frankly got a nasty personality and no ultimate attraction to her, Hillary Clinton, who's an obvious witch, and is a sexual pervert. But we have Donald Trump, who's, quote, a good man and successful businessman who wants to do a lot of things, but he is a high-level Mason. He has got we call a fixation on Apollo. He's got this Apollonic thing. So, in other words, we may have evil come into America looking really good with a populist appeal, and what you're saying is ultimately the financial system he's involved with is satanic, is what you're saying.
That is right. Now, he himself may honestly believe he's going to do good, and a lot of people will accept him in that.
Yeah, in other words, I think he does.
The fact is he's uncontrolled. He's controlled, Dr. Bill, and the controlling power is the Vatican.
Yeah, I do believe his intentions are good. I don't think I think he's naive. Just like if I was to sit down with him for an hour and explain firsthand evidence that I have about 9/11 and other issues, he'd be freaked out. He wouldn't want to accept it, but it's the facts. It's not open to dispute. But I think he is naive. To summarize the thesis, what you're saying is Donald Trump is a good man who's got good intentions, but he's naive and he's been controlled by evil powers above him in an evil financial system that by its very nature is satanic. And that is right. Because he's a porch mason and he believes in these lower ceremonial signs like 666, he thinks he's doing good, belonging to a secret order, but in fact he's controlled at higher levels by very powerful evil forces that on the face of it looks very good and actually may resurrect America back to a proper, financially stable and constitutional republic. But remember, evil is very subtle. That's why I tell people, do not think you can do battle with the powers of darkness without the power of the Spirit of God to discern inside you, because evil comes in very deceptively, and it's not just a person. For example, I think Donald Trump's a good man. I think what he wants to do and all his plans are great. But I think that the powers that be, it's just like if you don't get rid of the Fed Reserve System and the financial system based on funny money designed by these Khazarian satanic so-called Jews when they're not Jews at all, they're Satanists, you're never going to fix the system. And he's not talking about that, is he? He's not talking about real biblical money, which is based on gold. which we have with carrot bars. He's not talking about resolving international trade deficits by putting tariffs on, which may in some ways prop up America but may harm other countries. He's not talking about, being strong in our own country by protecting the actual nature of what wealth is, because fractional reserve money, funny money, is not money at all. It's anti-money. And, so you can play around with the principles, but if you miss the underlying thing that's controlling it, is what you're saying, this man is naive and deceived, and he will actually, even doing good things, bring us to a deeper state of control by the Vatican and the Jesuits, who ultimately created the financial system of travel notes for people doing their pilgrimages to the Holy Land over 1,000 years ago. And in fact, it was the kings of Europe and France that decided they were going to try to execute these Jesuits because they were not controlling the kings with loans. And the same system is going on right now with the derivatives market. And Trump may, quote, fix things at least on the surface for Americans. But what you're saying is he's not going to deal with the fact that we're step by step moving to a system of cashless money, which ultimately will come from America. So, in other words, if Hillary comes in, it'll be very obvious that she's evil and she's going to do globalist things. If Trump comes in, he will come in and do good things that will make America great again, but also move us step by step toward a cashless system that ultimately will mean we'll still be the author of the mark of the beast. That's what you're saying.
It's not going to change the prophecy. It's coming true.
Right. In other words, it'll just be one or another pathway. And I agree. I think
that's right.
Hillary's obviously evil. Trump is naively evil. How's that?
Yes, I think that's closer to the truth.
And I'm supporting Trump, and I'm voting for him, but I want Americans to repent, because, you see, it's not going to... Having our leaders being naive and being manipulated by evil means if the population repents, then they individually can start separating themselves away from this evil, because unless you fix the financial system, which Trump isn't going to do, which is fractional reserve money, you're still going to have what we call satanic money, and you're going to have unequal scales. And and still under the control of the Vatican, because they control fractional reserve banking on the planet.
That's right. Now, America's and the world's problems will not be fixed by political solutions. The problems are spiritual.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It has to be on an individual basis. If each individual American doesn't repent and understand that we can have evil come in with deception or with naivety. For example, this goddess of the spring, the way she brings Hades in and introduces us to the Antichrist is that she herself is naive and believes that Hades is actually a good person and a good force to make deals with. And this is why her mentor that wrote Rules for Radicals wanted to do a tour across America, because he saw in her someone who could introduce America to the Antichrist. So when the FBI officers looked at all these emails recently that were released, they were shocked and realized, quote, they saw Antichrist. They weren't really seeing just Hillary, they're seeing introduces to that. But we can subtly be introduced to a positive side of Antichrist, because remember, anti means in place of. So, you could have an Antichrist person who can be really good and really fix the economy, who can ultimately put us in a position where we are literally forcing the whole world to a cashless system that we're in control of that's very evil. Is that what you're saying?
I was going to say more than that, Bill, but I go along.
I figure I'll add to that. But I'm trying to kind of discern through this what you're meaning, and I have a feeling now I understand it.
Yeah.
That we have a naive leader in Trump who's good, but this is important on Election Day, because we don't want to be deceived even by good intentions and good actions. For example, I believe that Donald Trump is a good man with good intentions, but remember, both he and his family are deeply involved with high-level masonry. His father is obvious, and he's doing Masonic signs all the time.
And Dr. Bill, guess who was the head world mason? Pope Francis. He wears the ephod.
Right. The ephod, you call it, right?
Ephod.
The ephod, yeah. And the ephod is that special fish-shaped hat you're talking about. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. And do you know what that refers to?
Oh, that refers to the fish god, Dagon.
Right. Dagon, and Dagon comes from which star system? The Belt of Orion and Sirius B.
Yeah.
That's the one that they talked about that landed on Mount Horeb with the 200, were actually fish gods from that star system. They're a satanic serpent gods, they call them.
Well, you know what our friend said actually in this, our friend Trump said in this Catholic meeting, he said, we've got to come together as a world community. Now, there's the New World Order policy.
Right.
Now, I should say this again, we've said it already, the elections are rigged, the Vatican's in control, both candidates are controlled by the Vatican, both Hillary and Trump are both servants of the Vatican.
Right.
Now, I did say...
Either directly or indirectly is what you're saying. Hillary's probably more direct, but actually, if she even took the office, she's unlikely to have the Senate and Congress. If Trump comes in, even with his good intentions and even resurrecting the economy, he's got total control of the Senate and Congress. And if he even doesn't like Ryan, he can replace him. So that he'll have almost no resistance to do what he has to do. And even if the effects are good, we can be deceived by using good intentions and good actions that improve the American economy and move us sequentially toward the control system of ultimately is a cashless system control called the mark of the beast. In other words, we can be deceived by good and the powers that be that are above him, and he's totally naive to the point where even though he's a Mason, he's being deceived by his overlords that actually are moving him sequentially toward a specific goal. That's what you're saying.
Well, yes, and Bill, let's look at both candidates for just a quick overview here. Right. Hillary's running mate is Jesuit trained Tim Kaine.
Right.
He went to Rockhurst Jesuit run school in Kansas City, Missouri, and then he worked with Jesuits, Roman Catholic Jesuits in Honduras for a period. Now, not only is Hillary's running mate Jesuit trained, but her husband is Jesuit trained from Georgetown University, which I think is more well known.
You're talking about Bill.
Bill, yeah. Now, Trump is also Jesuit trained, and this is not generally known. First of all, his running mate, Mike Pence, is evangelical Catholic. Trump himself was educated at Fordham University, run by the Board of Trustees of the Jesuits in New York State.
And does that mean that Pence is a Knight of Columbus, which is also a branch of Jesuitism?
I'm not into that detail, but he certainly was trained by the Jesuits.
Right. Okay.
And that's important. So when we say that they're all Jesuit trained, these people were all put in place because of that Jesuit training. And Rome wants to come out on top, no matter how it happens, by one means or by another. No matter who is elected president, the same ultimate result will follow, but by a different route.
Right. Yeah, I follow that, and that's quite interesting. Now, on my day of graduation, I had seen the priest who had explained my near-death experience when I died at 8.5 and was sent back. But he showed up uninvited at my graduation day and offered me an order and a Jesuit letter from the Vatican to go to become one of the physicians of Vatican City on my day of graduation.
Oh, my.
So I believe you when I hear this statement that the Jesuits are in firm control, and they're always looking for people that they can institute into their system that have different skill sets that they can control, either directly or indirectly, and they can be totally naive like Trump. Trump is someone who I consider socially naive, which is why he counterpunches, even if his wife is probably cringing that he's still twittering at 3 a.m. At the same time, he's been his own worst enemy, and the media just laugh at the fact that he comes up with these statements like Machado, this beauty queen that got too fat, and he actually defended her, but they turned it around. So what you're saying makes sense, that we have this naive, well-intentioned person who's got been very successful and quite manic on the one hand, but they can bring him in to use him under a scheme of deception to make America not only financially better again, because they can resurrect the economy and resurrect things because they're the authors of globalism, the same Jesuits. That's why even the Russian and the Chinese revolutions were totally run by Jesuits. We know that with even the guns that were brought to Mao Zedong and the collaboration with the Khazarian mafia of Russia. To literally, the guns were actually delivered from U.S. manufacturing site, but it was a Canadian division and American divisions that held St. Petersburg until it was turned into Stalingrad. and the Russians didn't even have a pop gun. I know this from talking to my Canadian military. They were actually stationed in St. Petersburg and handed over the power directly to the Jesuit-controlled Khazarian mafia that were the Russians that started the revolution. people need to know this. They don't understand it, do they? That the Jesuits were involved in all of these things. All the major revolutions in the last century plus were run by Jesuits.
Yes. Now, it's an interesting fact of history that the same power that was in control in the first century, in the time of Christ and the early apostles, this power is prophesied to be in control again as the end approaches and Jesus Christ is scheduled to return to earth.
Right.
Both times the same power, under a different guise, but it's the same power.
Wow. That's remarkable.
Yes, as a matter of fact, when the Roman Empire visibly collapsed, not only was its throne handed over to the organisation that was to become the Vatican, not only its throne, but the titles of the emperors were given to the titles of the popes. They have the same titles, the same language, the same signs, the same day of worship, the same everything that the Roman Empire promoted is today controlled by the Vatican. Right. It's the same power, but under a different name.
In a sense, it follows perfectly the origin of the Roman Catholic Empire under Constantine, because even on his deathbed, he was a solar sun worshipper. He wasn't really a Christian. So, in other words, what you're saying is they thought that the spiritual deception trumped the geopolitical deception, and therefore they continued the Roman Empire as a geo-religious empire, which has infiltrated like an octopus all of the powers on earth and all the nations and all the financial systems.
Precisely, yes. And it's interesting that Constantine had a divided empire when he first came to power. Most of the empire, well, half the empire now, was worshipping the sun.
Right.
And half of them were not. Half of them actually were following the day that Jesus observed on earth, which was Saturday.
Right,
Sabbath.
Which included the Jews and the new Christians.
That's right. All the Christians at that time were doing the same. And he had to unite the empire. So he did two interesting things, Constantine did. First of all, he passed a law saying that everybody had to observe the Venerable Day of the Sun. That's what he called it, the Venerable Day of the Sun. Christians and Jews and Romans alike. And that was enforced by law. That was the policy of the Roman Empire, to enforce it by law.
Right.
And that's why all of Europe became Sunday. They turned to there. Now, what he did to pacify the Christians was, okay, you do that for me, I'll do something for you. So he sent his mother, Queen Helena, down to the Middle East to pick out a mountain that could be called Mount Sinai. It's not the true Mount Sinai at all. That's where tourists are taken.
Right.
And the true Mount Sinai is in Arabia. But the tourist one is in what's part of Egypt today.
I think it's down in southern Arabia too, isn't it? It's not even in northern Arabia.
That's right, yes. And then he sent his mother, Queen Helena, up to Jerusalem. Let's pick out a spot to keep the Christians happy. Since we're forcing them to go our way in the worship of a day, let's do something, keep them happy and unite the empire. He was a good politician. Right. So she picked out a place inside the walls of Jerusalem and called it the place of the Holy Sepulchre. And said, hey, we've found the tomb of Christ, which was, of course, not inside the city at all, according to history. It was on the outside.
It was a fortress of Antonius is what it was.
That's right, yes. So here was the Sunday law that was put into operation, and then laws were passed to pacify those who were against it, and discoveries were made which were not genuine. Very interesting history.
I got an interesting twist of why they had to get rid of Sabbath worship, because Sabbath worship means you have to, number one, have a personal relationship with God, and that God is the source of all wisdom, knowledge, and goodness. And if you have Sunday worship, you don't have to have that. And
that's true.
In a sense, it's not just a Sabbath day, it's a Sabbath relationship that's every day. And that relationship is exactly what this Pope has said, is that you as a Christian cannot have a personal relationship with God. So he's preaching the Sunday idea. You just have to worship on Sunday, and you don't have to actually have a relationship with God any other day of the week.
So here you have, Dr. Bill, you've said it very well. Here you have actually what the Roman Empire did, and now the continuing Roman Empire is getting ready to enforce Sunday again and force it on everybody whether they like it or not. But to do this, they have to bring a disaster upon America, because America is where it's got to start.
Right. Now, there's a lot of Americans that are going to resist this, because they're going to see Trump come in if he becomes elected, And if he doesn't, probably in 4 years you'll see another surrogate or a Trump-like person come in, whether it's his son or Mike Pence. But ultimately, they're probably not, if they put Hillary in there, they're not going to accomplish anything. And it's most likely, like Richard Nixon, she'll be impeached within a year and a half. So they can literally diddle around and make America further decay in the next 4 years until they bring in the next person. So if Trump doesn't win now, I guarantee a Trump-like person will win next time in 2020. That will mean that at that time they'll be ready to actually foist the entire system, that by that time the world economy will be in such disarray they'll probably have to have a cashless system. Like the Fed chairwoman has basically said, we can't afford to actually print money, we have to actually go to electronic money. And they're talking about what's called the Fed coin, which means electronic currency. Once you have electronic currency, you have to have biometrics. Once you have biometrics, and I visited Building 10 at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory where they make the DNA biochip, and with DNA endonucleases they can tell at the cost of less than 5 cents in less than 5 minutes you from any other individual on Earth, including your HLA haplotype of your tissues. In fact, it's interesting that a good deal of the numbering system of the Mark of the Beast, the first part of it, is actually tissue typing, so they can transplant your organs based on your number, which tells your tissue type of your organs. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
and I got that right from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory because they were developing it there in the late 90s when I visited. And when I visited in 1999, this is like 17 years ago, I already could do this on a laptop and a DNA endonuclease microchip with a microdroplet. It's a hundredth of a drop of blood in less than 5 minutes.
What technology?
Yeah, and now it's more advanced. So it means that ultimately, whether it's now or 4 years from now, a Trump or Trump surrogate is going to take office, and they're going to bring in a system that will make America great again, because the ultimate superpower is America. In fact, I tell people this, including Russia and China that are listening, America has weapon systems literally centuries ahead of anybody else, and that includes Russia. They need to know there is only one superpower on Earth, and that's America by a long shot. Now, we don't have bunkers for our people who will die in a nuclear war, but they don't care. And I had one four-star general say, I can be in an underground bunker several miles down in Westminster, Colorado, and I can prosecute a war from space. And without firing one bullet or one missile, I can destroy an entire nation like China and vaporize everybody in that nation, and they will die instantly without paint on the walls or setting a grass fire in their yards. People don't know this. They really don't conceive this. They don't understand it. They don't understand that when the financial system comes in with the mark of the beast, 90% of the currency on Earth, 2/3 of the dollars, for example, Fed Reserve dollars, are actually in electronic currency notes. They're overnight banking with the SWIFT system. 1/3 is printed money. So 90% of the money in the world is actually U.S. dollars and Fed Reserve notes, either electronic or real. They don't know that, do they?
No.
That's why they can expand the currency, and it almost has no effect on inflation because there's so many quadrillion real or virtual dollars out there. If they did it to the euro or any of the currencies like the renminbi in China or the ruble in Russia, their currency would blow up. It won't happen with the Fed Reserve notes, which means the beast of the Fed Reserve system, which is under control of the Vatican, will swallow up the BRICS nations here shortly, won't it?
Well, there are some interesting times ahead. And you know, Bill, there are surprises that await us in Bible prophecy. It tells us that in the end times there are going to be two major world powers. America is a huge country, the superpower country. Yes, of course it is.
Right.
And it will remain so. But power number one is the Vatican, and this is described so carefully, so much in detail, as the church that sits upon the city of the seven hills and has the same name as the city of the seven hills.
So basically the Antichrist, literally by the title he has on his head, the ephod, is the Vatican, and the beast dictator will be a future U.S. president, male or female.
Actually, the beast, there's two beasts in Revelation 13.
Right.
One which is the Vatican system. Right. That is the beast. And the second one is a beast representing a political power. Because both will be political powers.
Right.
And we know that the Vatican is a political power. It has embassies from all over the world.
Right. Remember, America is Ephraim. There's two houses, the house of Judah or Israel and the house of Ephraim. And those two houses make up, modern, in a sense, the modern archetype of Israel, even if it's apostate. Because Israel right now is an apostate, resurrected a fig tree without fruit. And America is now Babylon the Great, a whoredom, and not the daughter of Zion. as Yeshua Jesus wanted. So Ephraimites, which are now led by America, are led into deceit, and most of the church is dead, which is why they still even support Hillary Clinton on partial birth abortion. But they can also easily be led by deception, which is good, because everything that Donald Trump is doing is good. I mean, I support him. But we have to realize that if we don't attack the underlying roots of the financial system controlled by the Jesuits and by the powers that be above him, it'll lead us into a great evil, because it'll look and smell good, and it'll lead us into deception. Amazing. Jonathan, you can understand when I brought my initial thesis at the beginning of the hour, now it makes sense that sometimes, and this happens, by the way, in colleges, where when we see, for example, college-educated women, if you look at the Rasmussen poll, you can see college-educated women are often deceived that their version of feminism involves the idea of abortion on demand right up to the moment of delivery. And in other words, the pathway to hell can be paved by good intentions, or it appears to people in different segments is good. If you ask someone that are Democrats, that are Christians, that support Hillary, that supports women's rights and rights to choose, they'll say it's a Christian thing to do and that it's a good thing. The backers of Trump, which I'm a backer of Trump, and all the things he wants to do are good, but the powers that be are dealing with a financial system that by its very nature is Jesuit run and controlled by the Vatican. So what you're saying is, ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's Hillary or Trump, we're marching toward the end times, either fast or slow, toward a system of total control, where now the superpower of America is considerably stronger and can force the whole world through a cybernetic system that is the mark of the beast. That's the ultimate system that will bring the world to its final crisis. And,
yes, and Dr. Bill, Bible prophecy speaks of a young power that was to arise in the new world. It would be established upon the laws of God, a land of peace and refuge for those who were persecuted in the old world. Right. It would be founded on two lamb-like, Christ-like principles of power, that's civil and religious liberty.
Right.
It would grow powerful enough to dictate to the rest of the world. Then ultimately, it would be taken over by the first power, the Vatican, and it would enact laws through which America, then the world, will be forced to obey the wishes of the Vatican. But for this to happen, it needs a catalyst to cause a dramatic change. So first they infiltrate, then they will manufacture disasters, and when the wayward churches and the world are forced to face a succession of increasing disasters, they'll be overwhelmed with terror, and as you know, desperate people will resort to desperate measures.
Right.
And in America, it will be argued that all the troubles coming upon the nation are the result of America's departure from God. So church leaders will urge that the favor of God can only be restored if everyone unites in strict observance of religious laws, such as the repetition of the past Sunday observance. And government will be pressured to enforce this by law upon everybody. And those who refuse to fall in line will be seen as dangerous, and they will be punished.
Yeah,
First, not allowed to buy and sell, and then there will be a death decree to follow.
Well, one thing we've seen through this election cycle is exactly what you say. In order to enforce this, you have to have cybernetic control. We saw this with the media and the power of Facebook and Twitter to literally affect the elections. What you're saying is the database would force people in their behavior. They're doing it now in China, where they're testing out the system of your social interactive score based on your social behavioral score online, determines if you even can qualify for a specific job, no matter what your other technical or other qualifications are. What you're saying is that the move toward a financial system and cybernetic control of your SIM in the database will determine your compliance with behavior religiously and financially, and this whole system will then be forced on the whole world that will come from America, is what you're saying.
It comes from America.
And that may be faster, although all the actions of Donald Trump are in his own heart good. It may be faster with Donald Trump and whoever follows him than even the Hildebeest, who's obviously evil as hell. So we're being steered, as they say, like the fight promoter. Somebody asked him who's going to win. He said, "I'll win because both fighters in the ring are mine."